When you're successful in your work on projects, you'll eventually find yourself in a situation where you're being asked to deliver more, resulting in you working on more than one project at a time. This situation could be anything from working on an unrelated group of projects to working on a fully structured program. It could even be work that's not obviously a project, but whenever and however it happens, we need to think carefully about our ways of working. Speaking for myself, when presented with additional work or projects, my first reaction to the proposal is I start to make some basic calculations around how much time I have spare at present, how much time the work will take, and then I start mentally moving things around to see if they fit. After all, I want to be helpful. I want to help things to progress. I want to do what I can to enable the organization to succeed. My disposition then is how can I make this work? And before I know it, I've committed myself to another project, along with a set of potentially unexplored timescales, goals, constraints, and without fully examining the impact on everything else I'm expected to do. Maybe your journey is similar, or maybe you just don't feel able to say no to your bosses, or maybe there are expectations for you to meet, or maybe there's a shortage of people with the right skills in your organization, or maybe your organization has a huge number of projects to get through really quickly in order to achieve its goals. PMI reports that by 2027, the demand for project-oriented goals is due to grow by 33%, which equates to about 22 million new jobs. And if those jobs can't get filled, guess who's going to end up having to meet that demand? Which means we'll all have more projects. Whatever the cause, we all find ourselves eventually in the same place, managing multiple projects and sometimes struggling to manage. Work's piling up, you're working longer hours, you're having to submit work that you know could be better, and maybe you're starting to notice that your behavior, your feelings, your health are starting to change as you experience higher levels of stress. I know there's no way that my life's going to get less busy, so I wanted to find out if there are better ways to manage multiple projects before things get really out of control. Fortunately, there's a book that's just come out called Managing Multiple Projects, which looks at this question and finds ways to solve the problems we all face. The book recommends applying a framework to your work that in many ways replicates portfolio management approaches that are used by organizations involved in the delivery of wide-scale change. I enjoyed the book and definitely recommend you go and read it, but I had a few follow-up questions, so I set up a call with the author, Elizabeth Harrin, to find out a little bit more and to pick up a few more insights to her thinking about how to manage multiple projects. Firstly, I wanted to know a little bit more about the warning signs that people have already taken on too much work and may need a more structured approach.
I think there are a few things that jump out at me when you might be in this issue of trying to get all your balls in the air and keep them there. Work getting dropped, things that slipping through the cracks, that comes up quite a lot in the people that I talked to. That came out as one of the survey results, as well as something people were concerned about. People giving you more work because they're not really sure what it is that you do anyway. So you're busy, you're effective, you're good, give you another project. That's a warning sign. And also just feeling like you're out of control. I know that often when I'm mentoring project managers, we talk about that feeling because it happens a lot at the beginning of a new project when you're learning a new set of technical terms for whatever domain you're working in, or picking up the reins for something that's new to you. But there's more to it than that. I think when you're juggling a lot of things, you can start to feel that the only way you can get through it is to work more hours. And for me, that's a massive, great big red flag.
In the book, Elizabeth talks about applying portfolio management approaches with an emphasis on prioritization, recommending prioritization methods like the Eisenhower matrix, Moscow, and ICE scoring. So I wanted to know, why is prioritization so important for people managing multiple projects?
In my experience, everyone expects all their projects to be done, even the ones that are technically low priority. And I know when I was managing multiple projects, well, I still do, but I was in a situation where at the end of the week, I'd report on what I'd done, and my project sponsors, the many people I worked with and my manager, expected to see some kind of progress on everything, even the low important projects. And you can't do that. So prioritization helps you make decisions about what you spend your time on. And it helps you have conversations with other people about how you're spending your time and why their project is not moving ahead as quickly as perhaps they would like. And then it allows you to juggle those priorities. So if they're not happy, they can go and talk to somebody and get their project moved up the prioritization list. And one thing that comes up time and time again is that people say everything is important. And I just don't believe that's true. I think that's down to people who are poor at communicating, poor at prioritizing, and they're not doing their job properly. And I don't mean the project managers or the PMO team or the program managers who are stuck with dealing with that. I mean the leadership level who are not making decisions about which projects are closely aligned to their strategy and which ones they want to complete first. So there's a strategic element to prioritization, which is how does this all fit together to help us achieve our goals? And then there's a delivery aspect, which is if you give me these 5 things, I want to spend time on all of them and I will try to do that. But if I have to make a choice, I want to make sure that I'm investing my time in the projects that make the most difference, have the most priority for whatever reason. I think we come up with these lists, or the PMO may come up with a list based on what they have managed to squeeze out of the executive. And then the project manager who's juggling 5 or 7 or 10 different things has to apply that to their day. And what I've found is that I often don't get a granular enough steer on the different levels of projects. And it's not just me. I think if you are a senior project manager, you tend to work on all the top priority things. And if you're perhaps a more junior project manager, your projects might be all towards the bottom end of the list because you're still developing the skills to deal with things that are more critical. So as an individual, you need skills to be able to prioritize as well. Then you can put your own work into an order. You can communicate that back to the powers that be. And if they don't agree with it, they can help you reprioritize that list and change. But at least you've got a starting point that makes you feel good and safe about the workload that you've got.
You can find yourself in a situation where it's difficult to prioritize work because the work's coming from multiple sources. Essentially, you have multiple projects and multiple bosses. So I asked Elizabeth how to deal with that situation.
If they are very different, say they're 2 different directors within a totally different parts of the organization, then I would feel that you've got to take that to the next level up. So I'd be asking my direct boss or the PMO to help if there are conflicts between those 2 different stakeholders. And maybe we sit down and have a look at it, and make it not about Elizabeth's so busy she doesn't know how much work to spend doing each of these things. It's around, let's make sure these 2 priority projects are adequately resourced. And if we need more resource than Elizabeth can provide, perhaps as a management team of PMO, Elizabeth's boss, whoever, we need to rethink how we're resourcing this project and this project over here and this project over here so that everybody gets what they need. Because often you're not the only project manager in the organization. Sometimes you are, in which case it's a real pinch point. But if there's other people, perhaps we reorganize the workload across the team so that everybody gets their work done if it's all top priority. So there are different ways around it, but it does come down to, I think, being brave enough to be able to have these conversations with people without the emotion in them. Because I think the first time I was really worried about it, about what I needed to tell my boss and I couldn't do all the work, I tell a story in the book, I had a bit of a breakdown and cried down the phone. And then my boss at the time said, but your sponsor doesn't know what you do all day. And I thought, how does he not know? I mean, I spend hours in the same building as him. We sit pretty close. How does he not know? But the upshot was, he's a busy executive. He's got a team of his own. He's juggling multiple things as well. It's not his job to know. So it was my job to communicate more effectively. And I put so much emotion into that it was just, it was all about me and my dramas and my workload. But actually, if you can slightly take a step back and have a conversation around, here are the 15 things on my to-do list. If I invest the amount of time that it needs in each of these things, then that is 75 hours in a week, which I can't do. I'm not prepared to commit that to the organization. I shouldn't have to. So now let's look at, are there other people in the team who could help? How do we split this around? Do we stagger the start of projects? And you've got some non-emotional starting points for conversations.
Yeah.
I mean, it might not work, but it's a good way of at least opening the conversation. And if you don't get the answer that is supportive and helpful and reasonable, I think that tells you a lot about the culture of the team that you work in.
One of the things we notice when we start managing multiple projects is we start to lose track of the detail within individual projects. It starts to feel like you're spreading yourself too thin. That can be a little jarring, as you may be used to knowing everything that's going on in your projects. So I asked if there's anything we should be doing about this.
Well, you can either carry on as you are, or you can change the situation. Those are your options, really. So there's an interesting thing that you said there around spreading yourself too thin and having a very limited knowledge about each of your projects. The more I manage projects and the more I take a program management approach even to the projects that I manage, the less detail I know about all of them and the more I trust my subject matter experts and my colleagues who are doing the doing in the team. So I think there's certainly been a change in my mindset about how I approach project management from when I started, because in my early days, I understood everything. I knew exactly what was happening. I couldn't do the jobs of the people, but I understood their roles and I understood their deliverables and I felt very connected to it. As I've got older, my workload has changed and my outlook on life, I suppose, has changed. I've felt it's actually been quite beneficial to be one step removed. I still know what's going on, but I'm not so hands-on anymore. And I think that's probably the difference between projects that need active management, where you're in the weeds, helping the team unpick problems and really getting to grips with everything, which it suits the project at the beginning, perhaps, but maybe you can take a bit more of a hands-off reactive approach if you trust your team, if you trust your stakeholders, if you've got good governance. There's lots of parameters, but I don't think it's an issue necessarily to have a broad but not very deep knowledge of your project if it's all set up and running smoothly, because it does allow you to spend the time where it matters most, which is probably on things like business acumen and strategic planning and horizon scanning and looking forward and doing all of that kind of stuff, instead of, did you complete action number 62 on my list, which you can check once a week, at a team meeting or in an email or something like that.
The book places a lot of emphasis on stakeholder engagement. I asked how important managing relationships is then when managing multiple projects.
Everything. I am slightly biased because one of my other books is about stakeholder engagement and how to do it.
What's that book called?
This is Engaging Stakeholders on Projects, How to Harness People Power. So I do have, I suppose I've got a bit of a bias towards good stakeholder engagement. But I learned something really helpful from an old manager, which was that good stakeholders are allies when times get tough. And that was the premise for actually this one, customer-centric project management, that I wrote with that boss. And we talked in that book about how do you build good working relationships through getting continuous feedback. But that's why stakeholders matter so much, is because when you're juggling a lot of things, something's going to go wrong. Something's going to go wrong, even if you're only working on one project. And having working relationships, trusted professional relationships with people, means they cut you some slack. So yes, we want to keep them informed, we want to keep them engaged, we want to empower them to do their work on projects, but we also want them to trust us that we are making the right decisions and we're doing the best we can. And then when the inevitable goes wrong, we've at least got some credit in the relationship bank that we can withdraw, and people are not going, oh, well, she should have seen it coming, or everything's been wrong on this project so far. You're trying to build up all of that credibility in advance because it matters. Plus, it's more fun and it's nicer to work with people who respect you and who you trust, and you get the job done. So I think it's everything. I think if you do nothing else from the book, or just in general as a project or program manager, or within your PMO setting, just invest the time in working with people and being someone that they want to work with.
And you're absolutely right. It makes such a huge difference when things go wrong, just how much forgiveness you'll get.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've had to cash that in a few times and it's not been pleasant, but it has been okay. We've got through it because people anticipated that things might go wrong. People understood that we were being honest and transparent and that we were doing the best we could. And there was always that underlying thing of, good intentions. And we are trying to put people first and we're trying to do the right thing, not, oh, well, they were just always going to screw us over. Because that was never the intention. And you don't want that relationship to break down to the point where people would even think that.
Sometimes we can be our own worst enemies, and no matter how busy we are, how urgent the tasks ahead of us, we find various ways to sabotage our productivity. I asked about these saboteurs and how to overcome them.
Not knowing what you're supposed to be doing, being disorganized, all that kind of thing. So I think the first thing in overcoming it is identifying what it is that stops you from doing your best work. And procrastination is a big thing for me. I like to spend time on Twitter and social media, even looking at topics that are not really relevant to project management, but just generally catching up on what's happening in the world. And that's not necessarily the best use of my time. I wouldn't say never do it, because I feel I need and deserve some downtime as well, but there's times and places to do that. So procrastination is a bit of an issue. And if you identify it, then you can say, okay, well, if I do this, then I'll reward myself with 10 minutes of Twitter and a cup of tea or something like that. So you can just be aware. I think being aware of where your time goes is valuable. If you don't do timesheets, just track your time for a day and see how much time you spend on
shocking,
Facebook.
Isn't it? I was shocked as soon as iPhone started telling you how long you're using each app.
Yes, exactly. Your screen time is up by 22% this week. It's a bit worrying that they're watching, but also helpful, because there are loads of apps that help you with that kind of thing and focus. The other thing that kills my time is looking for online documents, looking for stuff I've put on SharePoint and now I can't remember where it is. And maybe I uploaded it to Teams, maybe I put it on my own OneDrive, maybe it's on Dropbox. Who knows where this stuff goes? We have a naming convention, but unless you have a really good search function. So being smart about where you save things, and maybe having a rule. I try and have a rule that there's no attachments on email. I don't use my email for storing attachments. So if the email arrives with an attachment, I need to save that attachment somewhere else where I will be able to reference it again in the future. So think through, how do you and your team store documents, and do you spend a lot of time looking for digital assets? And if you do, how can you set yourself up for success? How can you change how that happens so that you've got some systems in place?
The outcome of reading the book and my conversation with Elizabeth was an understanding that my approach to taking on extra work was flawed. The first question I should ask, whether out loud to the assigner or at the very least to myself, is not about how much time an additional project will take, but to seek an understanding of its priority in comparison to everything else that I'm doing, to things that I'm already doing, to things that haven't started yet, and then to see what can be deprioritized to make space for this new work. Most typically, whoever the decision maker is won't want to see current work halted for the new work. They'll want to know what your estimations are on how it will fit. So use this opportunity to size the work, assess the impact of doing the work. For example, will it slow down progress, or will it delay a current project, or will it fit in with no problems at all? By the way, doing this isn't going to make you look difficult. Blindly accepting work without understanding the implications is likely to lead to something failing. So examining the work in the context of everything else that's expected of you is the responsible thing to do. Also, I'm going to be a little easier on myself for not knowing every little detail about every piece of work I'm managing. I just need to keep track of KPIs and early warning indicators and make judgment calls about when I need to dig deeper. And I think a big takeaway from this is about communication. We have to let the people who assign our work know when we're at or approaching the limit. If we're not telling them that we're maxed out, it's hardly their fault if they keep handing us more to do. Anyway, here's something that may interest you. Whilst we understand that there's more work coming and maybe not enough time to manage it all, some companies are doing something that you might think is a little counterproductive. They're giving less time to do the work. In fact, they're moving to a 4-day work week. I interviewed the CEO of one such company to find out what the impact has been on productivity, salaries, and staff morale. I think it's worth a few minutes of your time to see what may be one of the future ways of working emerging before us. The link's right here. Make sure you let me know what you think. 4-day work week. What a nightmare.